Hello everybody, I'm Jonathan from Gamereactor, and today we are in London to see the new Hitman game, and I'm here with Hans, who is the studio head of IO Interactive. Thank you for speaking with us. So first of all, you have chosen a different approach to the distribution of this game, and since the initial reveal, you have changed it up a bit. Just once who is still a little bit confused, can you just quickly tell us what's going on here?
Yeah, so actually we made the decision what we wanted to do with the game very early after Absolution, because it took us 6 years between Blood Money and Hitman Absolution to get the game out, and that is a very long time to react to anything. When we launched Absolution, we also had our first experience with tweaking gameplay post-release, which back then was the disguised gameplay. But most of all, we introduced our first multiplayer live features with contracts, with the contracts game mode, and that took off beyond our expectations. So 40% of all Absolution players played it, and we have to this day 30 million contracts played. So these two things always, they motivated us to think about how can we actually expand that. We wanted to expand Absolution as well. We talked about DLC, could we do contracts, maps, or could we add something? But because Absolution was a very linear, story-driven approach to Hitman, that was, nothing really clicked. So we kind of wished we could have done that with Blood Money instead, right? And that was the foundation for what we're doing now. So back then we didn't call it episodic. This expression didn't even exist at the time. But by now, I think we as a market and games industry, we found words for what we're doing. Live games have been around for a long time. So games that have been running and they have a strong live component and they get improved all the time. And that is something we're absolutely determined to do. So the way we ship this new game is that we actually launch on March 11th. With the intro pack, what you can also play today here. This is the prologue that takes you back 20 years when 47 joins the agency, and to present day Paris, which is so far our biggest Hitman location in any games. And I hope you will also see that or have seen that when you start playing that. And then in April, we will add Italy, and in May we'll add Morocco. And every month we will add something to this ever-growing Season 1 and World of Assassination until it concludes in the Tokyo level in 2016. We'll also add the promised Thailand and US locations that we talked about. We have plans beyond that, but this is our promise. These 7 locations, that's our promise. And we will also add weekly content like the escalation contracts, if you find time to play them today, or the elusive targets, and of course contracts, and then there's the user-generated stuff as well, which is the contracts mode that is back as well. And we know that there was a bit of soul-searching, how we talk about that, because what we do here is new and groundbreaking, if you may, right? And whenever you do something new, people are, I think, rightfully skeptical, critical about it. And what's very important for us is to make clear, we sell the game for $60. You get everything we ever ship in this game. There will never be any microtransactions or any DLC on top. This is Season 1, you get everything that comes with that for $60, no matter when you buy it. You don't have to buy it in advance, you can also wait till it's out and buy it then, if you say, okay, I don't want to be part of the episodic releases. If you're a very traditional player, you might also want to buy it on a disc, end of the year. That's completely up to you. But if you want to be with us from the get-go and want to experience the live events and want to develop the game also with us, you can join March 11th. And you can actually join February the 12th if you join the beta, which we also use to make sure that our infrastructure and our technology can actually live up to these promises that we made. So that's how it rolls out.
What do you see as the main benefit of this way of releasing the game?
I see 2 main benefits there. One is that in an episodic release, we can actually have a time where we react, especially the later it is in the season, to the things that people do and play. We for sure can tweak balancing practically instantly. We can work on features and change that over the course of weeks. Obviously, if we add locations or destinations, this is a bigger endeavor because the Hitman level is very big. And actually, this is something that happened in other live games for many years. So games improved, but they normally don't add content to the game world, especially, I would say, not free of charge at least. Yeah. And then there are episodic games by now that add content, but they don't really tweak or work on the features. And we are determined to do both. And I know that there are some people that are critical about it, asking, why don't you wait till you've finished it all and ship it. And obviously when we ship this game, we think this is the best possible Hitman game we can ship. We also thought that about Absolution, and we think that about each of our games. As artists, we want to ship the best work of art we do. But we are not shipping a painting, we're shipping an interactive media. And you know, sometimes there are still things to improve, like there was in the Disguise gameplay on Absolution. And we fully acknowledge that. And now we moved ourselves in a position where we can actually do that. So if you're skeptic about it, then please join later. But just think about, this is your decision. Why? That's fair to wait, but why would you want to make all the people that want to be part of it earlier wait longer with you? So you can choose, like in the game, what you want. And if you join at a later point in time, you also will have a game that has been reviewed, played, and improved from all angles over the course of the season. So I might ask, is there possibly a better way to make the ultimate Hitman experience? We don't think it is. We think this is the right thing to do. And also, as a Hitman, the fantasy just fits, you know? You get a mission, you travel somewhere in the world, you customize yourself with the environment, you execute your perfect hit, and then you travel on. Some of these targets might only be there for a short amount of time. That's the charm of what we can do in the live world. But that's the other aspect to it. It's episodic, but it's also live.
So you will have a close communication with the community while you're releasing the game. How do you think this will work out? How will we see this in the game, this communication and feedback from the player?
So there are two aspects of feedback, and both of them are equally important. One is what people say, and the other thing is what people do. So obviously these things don't always 100% align. And there's a certain group of people that say more. There's a vocal minority, like in every art form, I would say, right? And then there are like 99% of the players that never say anything, but we see what they play, because in the last years we have more and more of these anonymized metrics. So we see what people actually really use, where they go, where they don't go. Also told us a lot about Absolution, where we knew that, okay, the sandbox levels, King of Chinatown, Streets of Hope, and so on, these things were the ones that people really kept playing, and still hundreds of thousands are playing them in contracts mode. So it tells us something about what decisions we as designers have to make. It's our responsibility to make the game and to make the decisions. But listening to the fans and observing what's actually happening in the game, that's both equally important for us. And based on that, we will improve it. I think some examples you can see is that when we announced the new game at E3, the discussion started about 47's looks. Is he too young? Is he too old? Is he too clean? Is he too dirty? That kind of stuff, right? And I think that's completely fair, but that's also something we can actually take into account and improve on together with the community, because what we're actually competing with are the memories that people have about the old games. When you played Codename 47, his face was, I don't know, 50 polygons, and his barcode was like 4 by 4 pixels, and the suit was more or less a black polygon. And now we're modeling like eyelashes and pores on the skin and the fiber in the suit jackets and so on. And obviously we need to make a lot of decisions when we go into these kinds of details. And they sometimes clash with the memories and the interpretation that people had back then, like a book adaptation, I would say. And that is a good example of where we actually, with the communication with the players, because that's something people more talk about, we can't really see that in the metrics, where we can actually react to that to make him, more fearsome, bring back some of the shadows in his face and stuff like that. Yeah.
So in Absolution, it was a very story-driven game. And as I recall, we found Agent 47 had kind of a falling out with the agency. Where do we find Agent 47 this time around?
Yeah. So the new Hitman game takes place after Hitman Absolution. Besides the prologue, that is, the prologue takes you back 20 years to his days of joining the agency and the graduation. But in Paris, it's a few years after Absolution. And it's the same universe, but the stories are not heavily built upon each other. So he's back with his long-term handler, Diana Burnwood, who's also back with the agency. That means you have the ICA opportunities at your hands, so the briefs, the loadout, the intel about locations, and so on. And your targets actually assigned to you by them. So they are targets not driven by 47's desire, but by actually what the mission is. And this is also where we think that 47 is best. He's back in his prime. He's traveling the world to exotic locations, taking out the rich and powerful, evil people of the world. And for that, it's important that he's back with the agency. It's this assassination tourism where we also think we excel as a game. whereas Absolution was a way more linear, grindhouse style road movie, if you say. And from that perspective, a bit of a detour from the other Hitman games.
So is each location going to have sort of its own narrative, or is there an overarching narrative in the game?
There's actually both. So there is an overarching narrative over the season 1, and all the missions and hits are connected with each other with this plot. The story takes a bit of a backseat, so it will not drive the actual content. The player and his decisions will drive the content, but we know that there's quite a big chunk of people that also play a Hitman game for its story. So a lot of the narrative is actually happening in the levels. So when you play them, you will, I hope you've seen it already, you will encounter people that talk with each other, they have certain actions, they interact, if you influence them, they do something else. And some of these are also story relevant. And the more you play also over the course of the season, let's see when it concludes, then you might want to go back and look at the Paris location and discover, this ex-KGB agent, that's what he did in the story, that's what he means to the lore and the universe. And that's how we construct this story. We see it more, it's more like a modern day contemporary thriller. It's not this road movie anymore. And we think that's also, I mean, in the new take on Hitman, or in the refresh, if you want to say it like that, we think that is very contemporary and feels right with this clandestine world that he's infiltrating. Yeah.
So during the presentation, you talked a little bit about these targets that will appear for a limited time, these sort of live events that's going to happen. Can you tell us a bit about how that's going to work and what we can expect to see?
So we have one feature that we call our, if you may say, perhaps hardcore live feature, that are these elusive targets. So an elusive target appears somewhere in the world of Hitman for a limited amount of time, like 48 hours. In these 48 hours, you have to take the target out. You have one attempt to do that. It's also simultaneous globally, so everybody has the same time window and the same chance. When you take him out, the way you do that, that's how it goes on your assassin profile. So whether it was a bloody shotgun kill or whether it was a well-orchestrated accident, that's completely up to you, but you have no second chance. If he escapes, he escapes. You can study the environment, hunt the target. Each of them has specific gameplay and art and, of course, a briefing. You can do this as many times as you want, but the moment you engage, then it counts. And we know it's perhaps not the most casual feature we have in the game, but it's something that we think is very worthwhile collecting, especially for the more core fans of the game. Because if you have all the elusive targets of the whole season, with silent assassin ranking and being in a suit only, I think that's a question of pride for many of our players.
So if you either get these targets or the escape is going to have some effect on the game world?
No matter what you do in the game, what you play, whether it's escalation contracts, elusive targets, or the missions, or the challenges, or all the opportunities, and so on, it will give you points that ultimately lead to unlocking stuff. So you can unlock weapons, you can unlock disguises, you can unlock items and tools, but we also have new features, like we have exit points now. So when you play a level, for instance, and in the Paris location, if you find the key to the speedboat, you unlock another exit and can use the speedboat to escape a level, which makes it faster to get out, for instance. You unlock stash points. Stash points are places where the ICA can prepare equipment for you. So let's say you want a sniper rifle, you cannot carry that into a fashion event, it would be very obvious. So you can actually have it placed by the ICA and you can have more of these. And you can also unlock start points. So let's say you have a specific disguise as a chef, you can have a start point in the kitchen, for instance. And with all of that, you can go into your loadout, you can go to the map, you can prepare the map, you can load the stash points, bring your equipment with you and the disguises, and that way you can set up each individual level the way you like it, which is going to be pretty important for contracts, but it's also going to be important the more you want to progress in the actual missions, and doing these and escalation contracts and stuff like that also will become interesting when you can prepare in a different way.
How much power is the player going to have over his loadout going into the missions?
Complete, actually. So you have, of course, certain slots. You don't have magic pockets where you can carry absolutely everything. So you need to actually choose which weapon is visible, which one is disguised, what items you bring with you, and you have a certain amount of slots. But the more you play, the bigger your arsenal will be, and you can choose that. So it's full loadout. It's not like in Absolution where the story determines what you have with you.
So you can sort of customize it to your strategy going into the mission, your loadout.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you say you take lock picks and I don't know, crowbars and stuff like that, it will be a different kind of game. Then we decide I take an SMG and some remote explosives. It's up to you.
So you have kind of very different locations here. How did you choose the locations, and what is the different design approach to the different locations?
So when we choose a location for the new Hitman game, we actually look at that it's a location, first of all, that fits the setting. So it should be something that's perhaps more urban, but definitely more pristine, because it's where rich and powerful people move, and the story needs to also support that, and the setting does. But it's also important that they are very different. So other than other games where levels often are alike, because it also allows for a lot of reuse and stuff, we actually pride ourselves in having completely distinct locations. So when you travel to Italy, you will see this is a completely different setting than, let's say, a nighttime Paris fashion event. And the same is going to be true for Morocco, and of course, and so on. And that is part of this tourism, this assassination tourism feeling that we want to convey, because it's exotic, it's interesting to see different levels. You customize, you familiarize yourself with each of these locations. That's also why the size of it matters, and the density, because if it was like an open world with hundreds of square miles, first of all, there would be lots of empty space. That's not meaningful to the actual gameplay, where we try to make every corner meaningful, and you couldn't really learn the details about the location, because it's interesting to know, okay, this is where the champagne stands, this is where the red wine stands, and these are the people that actually drink the red wine, and if I remove this glass, or if I break this glass, then they might take another glass, and things like that. It's that kind of detail that our players also want to learn about the level. So there's a certain limit to the size. So we want to go big, but we want to go reasonably, big, so not excessively big. And the other last thing is that we have a design dogma, I would say, that gives you no dead ends. So when you play, we call it a bit our Swiss cheese game design. When you go in, you're always a way in or out or around the corner. So let's say something, you want to break a line of sight that you can disappear, walk around the corner. You go down the wrong path. You don't have to go all the way back. You could go through a window, or use a drain pipe, or a ledge or something like that to get out, or find a disguise that allows you to walk a different way or unlock a door. So that is actually a level design dogma, that we don't have, funnels and very linear sections in the game, that it's always interesting to walk around and find a different way in or out.
Yeah, so Absolution had a very popular contract mode. What new features are you going to bring to the contract mode in this game?
So obviously we think, and we already see, that contracts in our bigger locations with 300 valid targets in each of them is very interesting and new, because it allows for variety we simply didn't have before. We had up to 50 in the previous levels, and the locations were checkpoint based, so much smaller as well. So right now, we think this is going to be a very big source of creativity in contracts. However, we also added a new feature to it, and that feature is called escalation contracts. Escalation contracts is content that we create, and you actually get, I would say, a simple contract in the beginning, and when you play it and finish it, you get a higher level of the same contract that becomes more difficult with, I don't know, let's say have a specific weapon, or use a specific disguise, or have more guards, or there are many things that can actually escalate, and I don't want to spoil them all. But that's more a competitive mode, where people will race to being best scoring and highest level of escalation fast. And we think this is a good addition to the contracts mode, because contracts often are very elaborate and long, and this is more like a 15-20 minute gameplay mode, where you can actually replay and have a challenge each week, or more often than that.
So what are you personally most excited about seeing when the players will get the game eventually?
So frankly speaking, we have lots of new features in the game. So of course, technology, our rendering, we're really happy with that. Audio helps you to get your sense of environment and so on. And there's so many new stuff in there. But I think the one thing I want to point out is I can't wait to see what people do with the new AI. Because that's what Hitman is about. People, they play around with it, they try to find ways we haven't even imagined, and they also try to break the game logic somehow, and that's pretty cool because this is what the game is about. We make a game that is able to handle that and react to that, and that's where the fun begins. And we have these new AI features now, like ushering people out and escorting them out, or unconscious NPCs, so they wake up and if you took their disguise, they're naked and try to find some clothes and things like that. And the new enforcer gameplay, where people recognize you depending on whether they really work with you or whether you're a stranger, and all these kinds of things. I can't wait to see how people combine that, because I think that's going to be pretty crazy, and that's what excites us actually most.
Okay, so finishing off here, I think Hitman is kind of our pride in Denmark in terms of video games. Are we going to see Copenhagen eventually as a location?
So thank you very much. I'm glad you see it like that. We have a tremendous long backlist of things we want to do in the game. We actually never self-reference ours, so we don't redo a level. We did an HD remake of the old games, but the reason why we haven't yet done something like, the great hits from the past and new, is also that we just have so many ideas where we're going to go, and this ever-growing world of assassination shall also, with the future games to come, expand all over the globe so that it can visit all countries, all continents, and so on. Obviously, Scandinavia is something that's very close to us, and it also needs to fit in the actual storyline, so it needs to be a location where you can hit a really prestigious target. And I think there are many opportunities also in Denmark for that. But I don't want to spoil what we actually have in our long-term pipeline there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.